Sarah Sharp, and I am a little bit of a pattern junkie, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We are going to take a traditional 4-patch design, which I've got over here on the design wall behind me, and we're going to infuse it with some color and just a little bit of spunk by using some various strips and little packets of color. So as you can see here on the table in front of me, I have my neutral strips. Now, the 4-patch over on the design wall has 9-inch squares, so I've cut my strips just a little over 9 inches because I want to make sure that I have enough wiggle room when I go to square up my block in the end. And then I have varying widths, and they're anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches, just because I like to work with really small pieces, but you can make yours whatever size you want. You'll also notice that we have these little packets of color that match the width of our strips. These I've made using a mini charm pack, just little 2.5-inch squares, pre-cuts that you can buy. You can use scraps, you can use something in your stash. Whatever it is, you're gonna wanna start with strips of varying widths that are all the same length. So as you can see here, I have strips that are 2.5 inches long, and these ones I think are about 1 inch wide. So I'm gonna take just a couple to show you how I put these little packets of color together, and we're gonna go over to the sewing machine and put them together. Okay, so for this I'm just using a standard sewing thread. I've got a standard stitch length, it's 2.5, and I'm just lining these up just as I would with any piecing, and then I'm just gonna carefully sew a 1/4 inch seam. All right, so as you can see here, I have my little thing sewn together, and I don't wanna press it just yet, and instead I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna carry on, add the next piece. And then finish up with a 4th. And this one I'm gonna kind of turn so it's a little bit wonky instead of lining those up. And then I'm gonna trim my seam so that it's even. All right, so now we're gonna get up and we're gonna go to the iron, and we're just gonna press all of these seams going in the same direction. We don't wanna mess with open seams because it's a little bit cumbersome when you have piecing that's so small. All right, so we've built our little pack, and we're walking back over to the table, and here you can see that this little pack doesn't really fit any of these strips that I have, so we just want to trim it so that it can be built into our strip. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim to even up the edge here, this little fringe on the edge, and then I'm going to cut to match one of the widths of the strips that I have over here. Now right here I have this nice 1.5-inch strip, so I'm going to look for the guide on my ruler. I'm going to cut 1.5 inches, and then we're left with this little packet here that we're going to put on our 1.5-inch strip. All right, so you can see we can trim this horizontally, we can do it vertically, we could even do it diagonally just to add some more interest in the quilt. So now I'm going to show you how to inset this little pink packet that we just sewed into this 1.5-inch strip. All right, so first thing I want to do is I want to just take this strip and I'm going to flip it over, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to flip over the color pack onto itself, leaving my 1/4 inch seam allowance underneath it. I'm going to just finger press that seam so I have a nice crease, and then untuck the seam allowance. And now I have my sew line because I have that nice crease. So I'm going to set this in my sewing machine, piece that together, and then when I press it into place, you're going to see it's going to lay nice and flat on top of the strip that I'm trying to build it into. All right, so we have a little stray thread. That's okay, we're just going to snip that out of the way. And now we have to do that same thing for the other side. So first we're going to trim this seam allowance, and then we're going to use this, kind of overlap it a little bit, line it up, and then we're going to flip it, crease it, and untuck. All right. We're going to put it underneath our machine, stitch gently, and again, I'm just following along with that creased line that I just made because I know that that's where I want it to wind back up. And as you'll see here, we're going to press it to show you that everything's in place. Just like that. So we're going to go ahead, trim that seam allowance, and then come back over to the table. All right, so now let's take a look and see how this measures up. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're using 9-inch blocks, and I have 9 1/4-inch strips, so we're close. It's about 9.5 inches, so I'm just going to take 1/4 of an inch off the end so that it matches up with all the other strips that we have over here. And voila, we have our little packet built into our strip, and now we can start building. Okay, so I'm going to take what we just built, and I want that to kind of be the center to highlight all that work that we just put into building that little strip. And I'm going to take another strip from over here, and let's say we want to add some blue, so we've got some pink and blue within the same block. There's a lot of freedom here. You can work within the same color palette. You can work within a more restricted color palette. Because we've got all those neutrals up on the board behind me, I really want to add in a lot of color into this block just to have some fun with it. Okay, so I'm just going to add in some little neutrals. You don't have to, it's tempting, but you don't have to put a little strip into every single piece. And actually, I like to have a little bit of a buffer in between all these different strips because the seams can tend to get a little bit bulky. Like for instance, if we were to take this and put it right there next to this one, well, I guess that's a bad example. All right, here. Let's put this right next together. Then when we go to sew these two together, we're gonna have all these competing little miniature seams, which is fine. It can totally work. It's just not something that I wanna be doing. So I'm just gonna lower that one down so that they're not quite next to one another. If you did wanna have your colors right next to one another, this would actually be a perfect piece to use because then you can put it there and you have the seams that are not competing with one another. Okay, so we've got a little bit of gold, we've got some green. Let's see what we're missing. Let's get some orange and red in there if we can. Let's get a little bit more blues. All right, get a nice little red pack there. So it's just something fun. You can play around with different options. You know, another fun thing to do, and the nice part about building things like this before necessarily setting everything is that, you know, say, oh, okay, I don't want to have green and gold in the same strip, so I can just take that one out, leave it there in its place. Maybe I want to swap in, you know, something over here instead, so it just jumps from one piece to the other. And you don't have to follow everything in color order either. In this strip set, what I've done is I've taken some of those neutrals, the same neutrals that we're using to build over here, and I've incorporated them so that they're kind of little spacers to isolate the color. And so then after we sew everything together, we're gonna wind up with something that looks like this. So you can see we have our inset strip, just like this, and all the others that we were building. And now we can just walk over to our design wall, and I'm gonna look for something that's similar value tone. So I'm just gonna take down this gray one, stick this back up, and instantly we have some interest there, but it's still a lot of neutrals. And so just for fun, we're gonna add a little burst of color, let's say right up here. And you can see how you still have, you know, the sense of the 4-patch, but now you've got a little bit of interest. So I hope I've inspired you to add some patterning to your designs or something that you're working on. Thanks.